What running slow gets wrong? Maffetone versus Zone 2. Most runners think Maff and Zone 2 are the exact same thing. But look, they're not. And even if you've been training your heart rate based on that assumption, and there's a good chance that you've been training at the wrong intensity the whole entire time. Not a little off, but completely off. So let's break this down. So what is Zone 2 and what is the Maffetone method and what running might be getting wrong? All right, this is where things get a little interesting because the Maffetone method and Zone 2 are often treated like the same thing, but they're not exactly the same under the hood. So let's break this down in a little bit more real information so it's kind of easier to understand. So it's very slippery. I'm on ice right now. Both approaches are trying to answer the same question. What intensity builds an aerobic system best without tipping into the stress? They just get there a little bit differently. So what Zone 2 actually is scientifically is Zone 2 is based on physiology, not formulas. Zone 2 sits around or below the first lactate threshold. That's LT1. And this is where lactate production equals lactate clearance. Fat oxidation is near its peak. Mitochondria is actively really high. In simple terms, you're working hard enough to stimulate adaptation, but easily enough to stay fully aerobic. So lactic acid is basically building up the higher the intensity is, and it allows your body to clear it out. But if you're running really fast, your body has a hard time trying to clear it out, and eventually you have to slow down. Your legs get really tired, and that's something to think about. Now, what's happening in your body is increased mitochondrial density happens, right? More powerhouse engines in your body, improved fat oxidation, right? You're burning more fat. Stronger stroke volume, your heart is more efficient, you have lower stress hormone response. And where this comes from is modern Zone 2 concepts are heavily influenced by researchers. And what they do is they use lactate testing, gas exchange, which is VO2, and real metabolic data. So Zone 2 is measured, not just guessed. Now, when using the Maffetone method, you take 180 minus your age, and that equals your maximum aerobic heart rate, okay? So adjustments need to be made for injury, your fitness level, illness, if you're on medication. And what the Maffetone method is trying to do is aiming to keep you at or below your LT1, same place as Zone 2. But instead of measuring it, what it does is it estimates it using population averages. Now, the big difference is that Zone 2 is based on actual physiology, individualized through testing. Maffetone method is based on generalization formula. So it assumes most people fall in a similar range. Now, the Maffetone method works surprisingly well for a lot of people, and that's because most runners, they train too hard. They sit in that gray zone. Too hard for aerobic, too easy for speed. And the Maffetone method forces you below that. Staying under LT1, it keeps fat oxidation high. It reduces the reliance on glycogen, so sugar, and it improves the metabolic flexibility. Be able to burn fat and then switch back and forth. And it reduces the chronic stress level. Lower intensity equals less cortisol, better recovery, lower injury risk, and it's all backed by endurance physiology literature. Now, where the Maffetone method breaks down is, and this was hard for me to kind of come to terms with at one point, was it's not personalized to an individual. And so what I mean by that is 250-year-olds can widely differ with LT1. One could be 130 beats a minute, another 155 beats a minute. And the Maffetone method would give both 130 beats a minute. Now that can be a big problem. Number two is it can be too low for trained athletes. If you're fit, your LT1 is often higher. Now, the Maffetone method might undertrain you. Now, I threw this one in because it could be a little controversial. There's no feedback loop. Oops. Zone 2, with testing, adapts as you improve. But with the Maffetone method, it only changes if you manually adjust it. It doesn't track real metabolic shifts. However, you can be doing the Maffetone test every month to see if you're getting faster and see if it works. But the number, as you get over a certain age, you may have to add 10 to 15 beats to kind of make it personalized, because it starts to break down when people get older. So when you're up around 55 to 60, 65 and above, that can be some real hard truth that comes into it, where you do have to make those adjustments. Now, that's okay, because you're adjusting it to you. And when you do the MAF test and you're seeing improvements or you're not seeing improvements, you can adjust for that. So you can kind of personalize it in a way. But most people aren't so truthful with where they are in their fitness and how fast they run. So that can be, a real big problem for a lot of runners. And I was in that camp, and I kind of still in that camp. Sometimes I just don't want to have to reduce the beats, because I've gotten more weight on my body than I would like to admit, or I haven't been consistent in my running. So these are some hard truths that do fall into this way of training using the Maffetone method. So what does the science say about intensity distribution? Well, research shows that the best endurance athletes train 80% easy. That's zone 1, zone 2. 20% hard, and that's zone 4, 5. And this is called polarized training. Now, the Maffetone fits the 80% easy part, but there are some people who say it ignores the high intensity part, but it doesn't, because he does call for that when you hit a plateau in your training. Now, the Maffetone method and zone 2 are targeting the same aerobic system. What I mean by that is the big insight most people are going to miss this. The benefit people get from the Maffetone method is not from the formula itself. It's finally training below LT1 consistently. For someone like me, this really matters a lot, right? Given that, I've trained quite a bit, right? I've also plateaued before, right? I'm now rebuilding again. The Maffetone method can be a great reset tool, but in the long term, you may get better results if you start with the Maffetone method first and then evolve slowly into true zone true based on feel plus data. Now, I didn't think I'd say that, but I've seen my experience using this formula and how it all works. So when you look at it, Maffetone method is estimating zone 2 ceiling, right? Zone 2 is actually the physiological zone. Same target, different accuracy. Well, I've had a lot of success using the Maffetone method. I've had a lot of success using zone 2. I do treat them kind of interchangeable, even though I've talked about how they're not the same, but they do get to the same result, just in a different way. Some people really don't like that method of running slow. They find it's just ridiculous, right? And it breaks their form down, and they don't like that, right? I don't like it either, but it's highly effective for me. So if you're looking to try, again, almost slipped on ice. If you're trying to lose weight and you're coming back from an injury, or you've coming back from burnout, or you've taken quite a bit of time off from running, is this a great way to get back into the sport of running? I would say hands down, yes. Now, is this something that can take you even further and make you run extremely fast? Yes, it works with that as well. Because here's the thing, whether it's a zone 2 or whether it's the Maffetone method, you're still getting to that result that you're looking for. Each of us is very different from another. So what works for one person may not work for another person. So regardless of what I say, I always say, try to experiment. Try figuring out what works for you and put it through its paces, right? You could set it on your watch, right? You could set all your zones thinking that they're great. But unless you've been into a lab to get it really tested, you still don't know, right? You're doing your best, right? So one of the biggest things I find, just to keep me honest in this process, is when you get out for that run. Look, you know, you've been running for a while, right? This is not your first rodeo, so to speak, right? You know what running slow feels like. Hopefully you do. And if you're using the Maffetone method, right, taking 180, arbitrarily taking this number, and then taking your age off of it, and then making adjustments, whether you've got extra weight you got to lose, or you're inconsistent, or you've been, you know, injured, or whatever it is, right? Or you're on medication, you know, reducing 5 beats or reducing 10 beats because of the medication that you're on. A lot of people don't want to do that part. They think, I am already running slow enough, or, hey, I am a runner, I want to run, so why am I walking? If you're in that camp, this is what I would suggest that you do, because it is a problem. Again, I've been there. What I would suggest is, if you're struggling, just trying to figure out, you know, whether you can run at that such a low heart rate. First, what is your age? Okay, check that, number one. How old am I? 50? Am I 55? Am I 45, 40, whatever it is? How long have I been running? And have I been consistently running? Like getting out there at least 3 times a week? Have I been doing that for quite a while? See, again, almost wiped out. The consistency part, see, I have never talked to Phil Maffetone. I've reached out to him a couple of times, but I haven't heard back. And so I can only assume, like, if you're running consistently, that's like all the time. Like, does that mean for like the first year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? I don't know, right? So that's kind of an arbitrary thing. If you're running consistently, well, okay, so I'm going to say that's 3 times a week, and it's for like at least a year or maybe 2. But then there's the other aspect of it is, do I have to add beats onto it and make it a little bit more personalized because of my age? And because once you get to a certain point, it kind of age, it starts to break down. So you have to kind of mess around with the number to get it to work. You may be in that camp, and that's where you may have to do. But if you're 300 pounds and you're trying to use this system, walking may be the best thing for you, because the biggest thing that affects heart rate, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but in my opinion, the biggest thing that affects my heart rate, because I've tested it, is my weight. The more weight I gain, my heart has to pump harder to get the blood going through all of the body. So the bigger I am, the more of a job it has to do. And if I haven't been eating well and I got clogged arteries and stuff like that, then that's a whole other side, right? So you got to factor these things in. It is, honestly, man, it's like science class for your own body. And it can be very frustrating going through this process. And so if you can get into a lab and get tested, figure out where all of your zones are, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, if you can figure out all of those, then good on you. But if you can't, then you got to work with your watch and figure out where all those zones are, right? Find your maximum heart rate. You can do the test, right? You can use the Kavarvan formula to figure out, you know, with your resting heart rate, your maximum heart rate, and then come up with all of your zones, right? You can figure that out. That's a good way to come up with your zones. I've used it. It works great. Sometimes I flip-flop between, you know, zone 2 and the Maffetone method. It's just something I do. Like I said, I sometimes treat it interchangeably, even though it's not. Even though they get there, they get to the same results at the end of the day. They just come at it from different angles. That's all. So yeah, zone 2 is more scientific, hooking you up, getting you to run on a treadmill in the lab and testing you properly. But for the masses of us out here, right, for the general population, we may not have the money, we may not have the facilities, and we may not have the desire to go ahead and get that done. You're maybe just a recreational runner. You just want to run because you love being in nature, because, God, who doesn't love this? Or you just may be, you know, that weekend warrior just trying to get rid of the stress from, you know, from work. So all these different factors. A couple of other things I want to mention, because I think it's very important. There's a lot of different things that also affect heart rate. So I had mentioned weight, but stress is a very big thing. So the higher your cortisol is and the longer it's elevated, It has a major effect on weight gain, and it also has a major effect on your heart rate, right? Everything's kind of coupled. You can't really take one, like isolating one thing. Like we are very complex human beings on how our whole body works. And I wish I had paid more attention when I was in school, but I didn't because, we don't when we're younger, right? Yeah, I just kind of been learning a lot as I've been using the method. And, look, I'm David. I'm the plant-powered runner. I have gotten faster using the Maffetone method, 3 minutes per kilometer faster over the course of a year, combining the Maffetone method and then slowly after 6-7 months, actually 8 months, then adding in a month of some speed work. It has made a massive difference into my training. And that was when I was that's kind of when I became a full believer, seeing it fully work, seeing what the numbers look like, going through the repetition of this, running all the time. It works. When you lose that consistency and your eating habits don't change and you start gaining weight again, it's hard to kind of get back into it all over again. But I have a blueprint. I have the path to get there. So like I always say, get out and run. I think this may have answered some of your questions.